And my mom, that was in the kitchen making gnocchi, I will never forget, comes out of the kitchen with flour all over her apron, and she says, "A bodyguard? Of whom?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to Rome, and I'm going to become the bodyguard of the Pope." And my mom said, "Really? What's his name?" I had no idea what was his name. The first time I met him, I was about 3 weeks in the service. I've seen him walking around, but now I was alone in a room, and I was notified that he was coming into the room in the Apostolic Palace where I was. All of a sudden he arrives, I go into the attention, he stops in front of me, he was by himself, he looks at me and he says, "You must be a new one." And when he said that, for me was a message that I can talk. As a soldier, you don't talk unless somebody talks to you first. So I came out of my attention, I took my white gloves off, and I went straight with my right hand to shake his hand. And he grabbed my hand, and I probably spoke for 6 seconds, saying my name, where I was coming, how proud, I don't even remember. And when I was done, I tried to take my hand back, and he didn't let go. And I felt, okay, this is awkward, what's going on? So I stayed still with my hand in his hand, and then he picked up his left hand and he sandwiched my hand in between his hands. And looking me in the eye, he said, "Well, Mario, thank you for coming to serve who serves." And then he let go of my hands and he walked away. Well, that's the day that I realized that whatever that man had, I wanted it. I had no idea what it was, but something tricked me. In order for me to understand who he was, I started paying attention to every word he said. I started reading things that I wasn't participating, but audiences talks and things like that. I started reading because I knew that whatever he had, I wanted it. As a soldier, I made myself a code of conduct. Every single time that I need guidance, I go to our Lord, I go to Our Lady, and I go to St. Pope John Paul II. To be a Swiss Guard is an honor, is sacrificial. You work 100 hours a week out of the 168 that there are in a week, which means you only have 68 hours to sleep and try to have some fun, but most of the time you can because you are exhausted. But His Holiness gets to know the guards one by one and establish a good relationship with them. One day I was in the third floor of the Apostolic Palace. I was tired, I was hot, it was July. I hear him arriving, and I only hear one set of steps, which means he's by himself, and I go up in attention, and I am hoping that he will stop and interact with me, even if for just 10 seconds, "Ciao Mario, come stai?" And instead, he just walked past me, and he didn't even look at me, he didn't stop, absolutely nothing. So I remain in attention, and I close my eyes, and when I reopen my eyes, maybe a second and a half later, he was right in front of me, and I did not hear him walking back, but he was just in front of me. And I'm almost 6'2", and His Holiness was, I would say, 5'10". And so now there I am in attention with His Holiness staring at me with his blue eyes of an intensity of a blue that I have not seen in any other human being yet. And I am in attention and he's not talking. Maybe 10 seconds go by, and that's an eternity for a soldier with somebody looking at you without talking. And then I noticed with the corner of my eye that he was putting his hand into the pocket of his cassock. And all of a sudden, I was still in attention. He comes out and he puts this rosary in front of me. And he stands there, and I'm in attention, and all of a sudden in Italiano, but I'll say it in English, he says to me, Mario, the rosary is my favorite prayer. Marvelous in its simplicity and profundity. Take my beads. And when he said that, I came off of attention and I put my hand like this, and he put these beads in my hand. And then he continued, and make them your most powerful weapon. He then took 3 steps away from me, and I stood there like this. And then he turned around and he said, welcome to adulthood. Always and continuously call on Mary, because she will turn you from timid into daring. She will always show you the way to her son. And he walked away. Since that day, I carry a rosary, not this obviously, but others, in my pocket. And I always tell every man that I met, or I meet, or I interact, to carry a rosary in their pocket. Because this is an authentic sign of masculinity. Every man should carry this rosary. And a couple of weeks later, I was in the Apostolic Palace with my rosary in my hand, and the Holy Father passed by, and he saw me with his rosary, and he smiled and he winked to me with his left eye. Now you can see how tremendously proud and honored I am of having spent so much time in his presence. And having witnessed his love for the Eucharist. Like that time, there was a Mass in St. Peter, right next to the Pietà, the famous Pietà of Michelangelo. There is a little room. At the end of Mass, 30 minutes, I thought, oh, His Holiness had already left. I went to that room and I opened the door, because I had done that in the past. And when I opened the door, he was still in there. And he was sitting in a chair, and he was holding a crucifix about maybe a foot long, and he was holding him and looking at him like a mom looks at his baby. And when I saw that, I closed the door and I walked away, and I stopped to other gentlemen of the San Pietrini that they were going to go in to clean, to say, His Holiness is still in there. And that picture, I revisit and re-saw that picture every single time I saw my wonderful wife holding my kids. Every time I will see Julie holding my children, my mind will go back to see St. Pope John Paul II holding the cross, holding Christ, and looking at him. I know John Paul II was a saint already when he was on earth. He was a saint, he was a living saint, and I witness his sanctitude on a daily basis. He was courageous, he was a leader, he was a man of prayer. I witness him walking in the garden and all of a sudden falling on his knees in silence and contemplation. I saw miracle being performed. There was a young girl, mute and deaf, that came to the general audience on a Wednesday. The girl had a little drawing in her hands, and she gave it to me, and she mumbled something, and I don't understand what she's trying to say, and her mom says to me, she wants you to give this to His Holiness. Okay? So I folded it, and it was a typical drawing that we all did. While I was eating lunch, my colleagues that instead stayed for the entire audience, when they came back and they sat at my table, they were discussing a situation that happened which caused the guards to go into an alarm stage. Well, the guards told me that on his way down, he had already done this up, and on his way down, all of a sudden, he stopped and he walked back like 15 feet, which for the guards was panic because they had already moved forward, so they had to go around and one run this way. And the reason why he moved back, he went and he blessed a little girl that was barely above the barricades. He blessed a little girl's mouth and ears. That little girl was the girl that gave me the drawing. The name of that little girl was Rachel. And after he blessed her mouth and ears, she started talking and hearing. He was drawn back to that girl, and he knew exactly what to do, and he did it. So that's why I know that he was a saint, because the Holy Spirit was already performing miracles through him while he was on earth.